Mental health can be scary and polarizing, and in Ari Singletary's case, it was embarrassing to admit. Her daughter Gabby has bipolar disorder. This is something that she has suffered in silence with for years. That is until now. May we know is Mental Health Awareness Month, and we are here today to try to change the conversation around mental health. We have Ari here as well as Dr. Tracy Alloway. I want to thank you both for joining us today. We do appreciate it. Ari, I do want to begin with you. I want to first start with this. The reason why you have decided to open up today and share your story. Why is that?
I think at first it just started with me wanting everyone to stop asking me about my daughter because I was tired of trying to find something different to say. And I felt like I wasn't being authentic. And then as I went down rabbit holes, I saw other people that were dealing with it. And I just saw that it wasn't talked about. It wasn't dealt with. Like nobody, it's kind of like a hush hush thing. I don't know how to explain it. But more than anything, getting past the embarrassment and hoping if I help one person, then I would feel like, the last 4.5 years will have been worth it.
Yeah. Dr. Alloway, I want to bring you in by asking you this. You mentioned the embarrassment behind this. This is a taboo topic. Let's speak to that, why it is that folks are so afraid to speak openly about either themselves or loved ones having mental health issues.
Yeah, I appreciate you asking that important question. We do know, as you mentioned, that May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And it is unfortunate that there's still a lot of negative stigma socially, culturally about expressing mental health needs and bringing that awareness. And so we often downplay symptoms as a result of that. And because we consider mental health as almost an invisible disease on the surface, we don't notice any injury. And so that can further cultivate this sense that, well, if I look fine, then I should be feeling fine. And it can also perpetuate this cycle of shame and guilt in the individual who's experiencing the mental health issues as well.
You mentioned not being able to notice it or see it that someone has these issues. Ari, I want to bring you in with that because I want to talk about when you first started to notice that something was going on with your daughter, Gabby.
I did not get a heads up or spiraling in, and I think that now looking back at it, maybe because as parents we put our kids up on this pedestal, and maybe I just missed a lot. But for me, it was January 14th, 2020. My daughter, when she would go to work, I would always wait until she was like close to the entrance, and I would always sing like a song to embarrass her. And on this particular day, January 14th, 2020, I sang Whitney Houston's I Will Always Love You. And it was so loud, and she was so embarrassed, and she was getting in the car with her friend, and she was just like, stop. And so it was ironic because literally that next day, she got off work, she came home, and it has never been the same since then. It was just like lights out. There was no warning. She came home, she wasn't herself. She was just talking erratically, and at first I thought that, okay, she's just trying to get out of being 20 minutes late on curfew. But then the next day came, and then the next day came, and it got worse, and it got worse, and it literally, there was no leading up to it. It was just a lights off situation. It's just one day she just changed.
Dr. Alloway, she mentioned lights off. For those of us who are not familiar with this disease, we're kind of just like, what exactly does that mean? Can you explain it to us?
That's such a great question. And bipolar specifically is a very complex illness, and we can consider it as the onset when it begins, the course, and then the duration of the period. And so it's not uncommon, especially in young females, for a trigger event, a stressful event to occur. It can lay dormant as far as the symptoms are concerned. And then you have this explosion, or, as you talked about, Ari, this lights out moment where you can maybe see this come into play during late teenagers to early adulthood. So it could be present, but under the surface until a very specific traumatic event or stressful event even occurs in the individual's life, and that almost unlocks this whole box of symptoms that you've been sharing.
Dr. Alloway, what can we look out for? Parents or folks with loved ones who perhaps think maybe my loved one is struggling somehow, I'd like to intervene. What should we be looking out for?
Um, Bipolar is often misdiagnosed. It's one of the illnesses that's most frequently misdiagnosed. And the reason for that is because it's often misdiagnosed as depression or anxiety, because those are the symptoms that show up first. So, as a parent, as a partner, a loved one, a friend, look out for those early signs of maybe depressive symptoms. Is your friend or your partner or your family member, are they showing this kind of slump? They don't feel that same sense of joy for life, that motivation that they usually experience, or maybe a sense of anxiety where they're isolating more. They're not expressing this need to be social to in the same way that they used to. So early signs of depression and anxiety may be indicators of something like bipolar disorder.
Ari, back to you. You mentioned 2020s when you noticed that this light switch, things changing with your daughter. Fast forward now to 2025. Big question is, where is she now?
Truthfully, I don't know. So she had moved up north to be with my mom, and it's very hard to live with someone with a mental health condition. So I would always say I always slept the best when all of my kids were home. But then it got to a place where I did not sleep well when my baby was home. And I didn't know what was happening, and I didn't know where she was. Or went back to school to get my master's, and I'm writing my thesis, and I hear my front door close, and my daughter's gone, and I don't know where she is. And I'm walking through my neighborhood trying to find my child. And so she went up north to be with my mom, and then that got to be too much, and it got to be too much for my mom, and so then she went with her grandma. So she did not in Minnesota. She didn't resurface for a while, and so I had filled out 2 or 3 missing persons reports. And the day after Christmas 2024, I got a phone call from a police officer and asking me, about her, and she was there. So right now, I do know the state that she's in, but I don't know like physically where she is physically. I haven't spoken to her in a while, and I will say, in a homage to my therapist, like she told me for years, like I always thought that because we were so close, we were inseparable. That was she always called me twin, like we were just always together, that surely I would always be her safe space. And she was just like, one day she's gonna turn. And she's like, she'll turn on you. And I was just like, not my baby. I watched her turn on everyone, but not me. And then she turned on me and her brother and her stepfather and everyone. And so I don't know. So to answer your question, I really don't know.
You mentioned Gabby's stepfather, her brother. We saw photos. We have pictures of them growing up. Look at this, adorable.
Oh.
I know that is difficult to watch right now. Your babies. What's their relationship like now?
They haven't spoken. They haven't spoken in a while, and it's just kind of weird because I call them Frick and Frack, and they would always argue over, well, which one's Frick and who's Frack? And I'm like, does it matter? And my son, in this chapter of his life that he's in, he never imagined having this chapter without her. They were inseparable. He thought that she would be a part of his life now. And I think that one thing that I had to realize is that it's not just my story. Like, it's his story. It's her father's story. It's her stepfather's story. It's her stepsister's story. It's her grandma's story. It's everyone's story, but I mean, they don't have a relationship. I know he misses her. He misses her a lot. And so he just kind of deals with that on his own.
You mentioned where he is now. We see here he was a standout football player. This was when he was drafted to the NFL. A very, very happy moment for you, your family, your son, obviously. But I know in the back of your mind, beneath all of those smiles, you're likely thinking about Gabby as well. What is that like, trying to juggle and balance that? The happy times with the tears that I'm sure are happening on the inside.
It's hard because it's, on one hand, I feel like I can't be too happy because I have this going on. And like if I'm too happy over here, then being neglectful for what's going on over here, but everything that was happening with my daughter had consumed me in a place to where it was actually his agent that came to me and was just like, "Look, mama, your son needs you," because I was always treating Amir like a well-oiled machine. He's never been problematic. He's got the biggest heart you'll ever see, and he's just been easy running. And so because of that, that just let me be there for him physically, but mentally, I was always somewhere else. I would tell people, like, on my computer, I've probably got over 80 tabs open, and three of them might be work, and the other 77 are me trying to find ways to fix my baby. So that part's been hard because there's no, I don't know how to balance it. Like, I've still, to this day, I feel guilty for the really good days I have. And I feel like I should have more bad days because I know she's might be having a bad day.
Dr. Alloway, I have to bring you in now. We're hearing key words that I'm sure are just, it's heartbreaking to hear from this mother right now. She feels guilt. On one hand, she has a child doing very well, very successful. On the other, she has this baby that she can't quite wrap her arms around. I mean, what do you say to her? Because obviously, besides her children, we have to think about Ari's mental health. What do we say to her at this point in her life?
Yeah, I really appreciate a lot of what you shared today, Ari, and it sounds like she's being very proactive. She shared that she has a therapist that she sees, and so she's also prioritizing her own mental health. And the best thing that you can do, and it sounds like through Gabby's whole life, you have been very present, very loving, very supportive. And I think reminding yourself of that knowledge that you are a parent who was and is continually available for her. And as you mentioned, these are all these other people's stories. It's Gabby's journey right now. It's her mental health journey. And it sounds like you're providing her the space to find her emotional health, but you're also letting her know that you are always her safe space for her. And that ultimately, as a parent, it's the hardest thing to do, but it is also the healthiest thing that we can do for our children.
Dr. Alloway, we know, because you and I have spoken over the years, we've done stories together, millions of Americans are struggling with mental health disorders. They vary and they can be very complex. Why do you feel it's so important for us to be open about these issues that we're seeing with so many people tackling, again, in silence?
A big part of that is this perceived sense of weakness. Again, I use the word perceive intentionally, that it's not an actual sign of weakness, but we have the stigma, this sense that, hey, if I talk about it, then it actually, and it becomes more real. I'm saying aloud that I'm not able to do this alone. I need support. And being vulnerable is very difficult. But maybe it could be helpful for us to look at mental health in three levels. The first step is simply that awareness. But maybe you want to seek a therapist just to vent, to let go, to release that valve. So maybe you're not ready to unpack, something from the past or a trauma, and our brain's efficient. We keep it in a black box sometimes for a reason, but maybe simply having that knowledge that, hey, there's someone there who's trained to listen to my day to day, that I can offset some of that. So I'm not bringing it home. So it's not my partner, my family, my loved one that has to bear the burden or the responsibility of helping me navigate. And then hopefully level two, that next step is that you begin to adopt a sense of agency. Well, now that I know what some of my mental health needs are, what can I do for me? What is in my control? What steps can I take? You talked about the 77 tabs open. And one question to ask yourself is, how helpful is that in supporting your mental health and ultimately Gabby's mental health? And you might say, some days it's very helpful because it makes me feel like I'm doing something. Other days you might feel like it's overwhelming. I can't manage these 77 tabs. So that is that agency where you do that check, you self-check and you think, what do I need for me to find myself in a more regulated or calm state? And then third is that maintenance, having someone again that's maybe your cheerleader, that therapist that can validate some of your healthy decisions, that can help motivate you to continue some of those healthy decisions. But that first step, if some of us are wondering how to even get started and even feeling, well, I don't want to talk about these negative things that happened in my past or my childhood, I'm not ready. That's okay too. Maybe you want to talk about your day-to-day stresses. Well, how can I be a better parent, a better partner, even a better person for me? And that first step may be enough to get you to the door to seek that mental health support.
Thank you for that, Dr. Alloway. I'm going to tell you, Ari, I'm very familiar with your story because I've known you for years and didn't even know about what Gabby was going through, as I'm sure is the case with so many other people in your life, because again, you've been doing this or dealing with this in silence. But I do have to tell you, I was able to pour through all these videos and pictures that you were able to share with us of them growing up, your babies. But one in particular, it got me. It was a special video you shared back in 2020, as you mentioned, that "I Love You" video. I believe we have that. We're going to play a little snippet of it. And this is when, as she was driving away, but to me, it shows the relationship you two had. Very jovial. Both of you are pretty funny. We know, lots of dancing, lots of singing. Andy, I believe we're going to roll that for you right now to take a look back.
And I will always love you. And
It pauses for a while, and I believe you go back to
will
singing.
always love you.
And Ari, what goes through your mind when you look at this video now?
That was it's serendipitous. That was my last day with my baby. That was my last day with her. And it's so funny that she would always say, Gabby knew that in order to get me to do whatever she needed me to do, she would say, I'm not going to put your lashes on or I'm not going to do your edges because I can do neither. And so she would always come and she would put, like, her lash technique was just amazing. She would just lay them on, or she would like get the edge brush and be like, hold on, be still, be still. And it's not fair. If I'm being honest, like, it feels like it's not fair, it's just, that's what goes through my mind. It's not fair. You couldn't have paid me to believe that I wouldn't be attending my daughter's graduation from college, that she wouldn't be pledging my sorority, that she wouldn't be at her brother's NFL games, just posted up. You wouldn't pay me to believe that with, the more you learn about bipolar disorder, like, I can't separate fact from fiction anymore. When I do talk to her, I don't know what's real. I don't know what's not. It's just, that's the only thing that goes through my mind. It just feels like it's not fair. And I know people say things like, I wouldn't wish this on my worst enemy. I feel like this is something that you would only wish on your worst enemy. And that's a terrible thing to say, but it just feels like more than anything, it's not fair. That's my child. I miss my child. I know that we're supposed to, I grew up in the generation of, you don't go to therapy, you pray, you go to church, you do these things. And I know that we're always supposed to say, like, oh, your kids, those aren't your little friends. But my kids, those are my little friends. And I'm their mom. And I gave birth to my best friends. I gave birth to the two people that know me inside out, the two people that I thought we all have Ohana, like little tattoos of Ohana, because our group chat was called Ohana, because we'd always say Ohana means family, and family means no one gets left behind. So for me, it's not fair.
You just mentioned something I want to hone in on because, as a member of the African American community, many would say, as you mentioned, even therapy is kind of something that's kind of like, what? You're seeing a therapist? As you said, go to church.
Yeah.
Can you speak to that, Dr. Alloway? The fact that you have a lot of people saying therapy is, as we mentioned, taboo. What, you see a therapist? But it should be normal. It's okay.
Yes, you're so right. And, as a woman of color, that is something that we hear across the community like that. And that's why I think it's so incredibly brave of you, Ari, to share your story and your journey in the same way, because I know it'll inspire so many women. And again, if someone is seeking therapy, find a therapist whom you can identify with. Maybe that's a physical identification, maybe it's an emotional identification, but find someone that you connect with. Ultimately, we know from research that therapy is most effective when the client feels they have a connection with their therapist, whatever that might look like for you as the client. And you're right, we also sometimes paint therapy as an either or, a yes no. So if you go to therapy, you can't do these other things. Or if you're doing these other things, like going to church or praying, then you can't go to therapy. And I think it's also important to shift that mindset that you could do both. Both are helpful. We know both from a research and a spiritual perspective that having a faith system, knowing that you have that sense of support in a spiritual community or faith-based community, can be very supportive to mental health. So I think it's important to move away from this feeling that if you do one, you can't do the other. We can do both to find, healing for ourselves as well.
And I want to ask you this, Ari, because I know it's been a slow process of you letting go of this veil of embarrassment and opening up about what's going on with your daughter. What have you been hearing so far as you slowly reveal, Gabby's not away at college, Gabby's not doing okay?
So the one thing was that a lot of people were going through it and they weren't saying anything. And they were saying, oh, my child suffers from this, from that. I don't know specifically with bipolar disorder, but when I look at the younger people that are suffering from like anxiety and depression, I'm so thankful that I grew up in a time where my worst moments are not online, where I didn't have to compare myself to people online. I always say comparison is the thief of joy. And these new kids, they just sit there all day scrolling and scrolling. And I think I told my kids one time, I was just like, this friend that you guys are loving and, idolizing, he was like I ordered lunch one day for my team. He was my Uber Eats delivery person. People show you what they want you to see. So as this journey has gone, I'm guilty of it. I show people what I want them to see. Everybody misses the post. My life with Gabby, like Keitha said, it was a good time. Like, it was never a dull moment with Gabby. Like, Gabby would come into my office and say, what are we doing today? I work from home. I'm working. What do you mean, what are we doing today? I'm working. And then she'd be like, oh, like I was inconveniencing her. And then she's like, well, what are we doing for lunch? And we all used to share locations. And Amir would be like, did y'all forget someone? Because we would be eating sushi. And then he would call and we'd be like, oh. We were like, we forgot Amir. And so I've been hearing a lot of people that have just like, we feel like we have to keep up this facade. Even with growing up with the whole, we don't go to therapy, we go to church, also comes with we don't talk about what goes on in our house. And so a lot of that still is heavy. Like, people are just like, oh, you can't talk about that. You can't let people know this. But I've had people that have reached out like, hey, my child is going through this, or hey, this happened, or even just seeing people all this time that I was treating it like I was on an island, that, we could have all been logging into therapy and crying together at this point because there's been so many of us, and I think just that's been the big thing, is just having people say, man, like, this is affecting me. This has happened to me. Like, I do deal with depression, but I've always been able to, like, still function. So to have people that be like, yeah, my child is going through this, going through that. It's been kind of like, really? Because I think people look at our pictures and they're just like I felt like we had a perfect family, like the three amigos, my frickin' frack, my everything. So it can happen to anybody. I tell people I was prepared for anything. Like, my kids don't want to go to college. My kids drop out of school. My kids, I don't know, teen pregnancy. I was prepared for everything, but I did not have mental health on my life bingo card at all. And I have just had to, I think a lot of times I'm still in denial. I know that I'm still in denial about a lot of it. And it's been, I don't know, it feels like a dream. That's it. It feels like a bad dream. It feels like at any given day you'll wake up and everything will be back to normal. She'll be back poking her head in my office during my meetings on screen, and my coworkers asking, well, what are you guys eating for lunch today? But it's just not reality. So I think that I am still in denial on that part. So
And I have to ask Dr. Alloway this, as that number grows, we heard Ari mention people reaching out, already asking or saying, I'm going through this, that too, how do I deal with this? I mean, how does she respond to that? Because I'm certain she will get people reaching out saying, hey, I'm dealing with this as well. What are you doing? What should I do?
Yeah. It's wonderful to know that the flip side of having our life online is that there's also more resources available online when it comes to mental health. So while there's, as you've shared some of the more negative and pervasive effects of that, we know that there are websites like BetterHelp, for example, that offer virtual therapy. There's Psychology Today, which will list all licensed therapists and providers in your area that also buy insurance. And so there's a lot of options like that for someone to get seen relatively quickly. A lot of times, people's different works offer a kind of EAP program, employee assistance program, where a lot of times employees will have 5 to 6 sessions of complementary therapy as well. So, if you are concerned and you want to talk to someone, the first step you could do is check your work insurance. Do they offer an EAP program, and then set up an appointment if you feel like that's your starter kit, if you will, having those first few sessions to help out. If you feel you want something more longer, more sustainable, then you can look at websites like Psychology Today that have bios of therapists in the area. So there's but for you, sometimes it could be helpful to have a script, Ari, so you don't feel like you're constantly navigating the emotional stress or feeling overwhelmed. And I say this to my clients in therapy too, that having a standard script, which is thank you for listening. I appreciate that, and X, and then that might be, whatever's authentic to you. But again, taking away that emotional need to respond uniquely to each person, and also feeling like a way that you can manage their response. Sometimes when we share something so vulnerable, the expectation is we want them to connect, we want them to respond with empathy, and not everyone maybe has that capacity or the knowledge to do that, and it can feel very hurtful for us when we're doing the sharing. So it could be helpful again to have a standard or a scripted response where you can say, well, thank you for listening. I know maybe we have different perspectives, but I wanted to share my journey, and hopefully it can help you or someone else in your family.
Some great advice there.
Yeah.
Ari, I have to ask you to speak to those who are in a situation now where you once were, where they felt embarrassment about this, about their child, their loved one suffering from mental health, and they're afraid, they're suffering in silence. What would you like them to know? What would you like to say to them?
Your village is bigger than you think. You have your people out there. I am in a NAMI group, and I would recommend that to anyone. It's good to be in a group of people that are all going through the same thing. You're not alone. Even though it feels like you're alone, you really aren't alone. And it's okay to feel your feelings. And I'm getting to the place where hopefully I can fully mean it when I say it, but you don't have to be embarrassed. It's not a reflection of you. You can't control what happens in life. You can't control how things happen in life. You can only control your reaction and your responses. That's the only thing that we can control. So everything that feels like you can't get through, you push through. And I would just say you really don't have anything to be embarrassed about. And you didn't fail. I have to tell myself that all the time. You didn't fail. I always joke and tell people, like, I'm batting 50%, I was like, it's a C average. I'm like, it's a C average. And my husband will always say, he was just like, you got an A in parenting. He's like, you've got an A. He was just like, don't ever feel, you got an A. And I was just like, okay. But yeah, you didn't fail.
You certainly did not. Ari, Dr. Alloway, thank you both so much for joining us here and having this open and candid and much needed conversation. I'm hoping that it changes minds, gets rid of the stigma. We need to be open about what's going on in our lives so that we can help sometimes others. Thank you guys again.
Thank you.
Thank you.